It feels like the running back position in particular is being obliterated right now by injuries and roster maneuvers, and there's a lot of changes in my running back rankings. Starting out with our first change of the whole offseason, I finally caved and put Jahmyr Gibbs over Bijan Robinson. Now, I wanted to be 100% clear before we enter into why I absolutely view both these guys as still your two best picks in the fantasy draft season this year. I do think Bijan is still a really good player I would love to have in a fantasy football capacity because he's an elite all-around player who gets the ball in pass-catching situations. The reason I decided to do this and just commit, I'm going Gibbs over Bijan, is honestly because of how bad Tua was in the preseason game. So I don't even know if it's going to be Tua all year, but if it's Michael Penix, this is another guy that I just don't feel super reliable with when it comes to Atlanta's offensive upside this year. So if we were in position to where both of our top picks were on middle tier to lower tier offenses, then I'd probably still keep Bijan there. The fact of the matter is Detroit's offense, probably a top 5 unit this year. I'll go ahead and make that switch and confidently go Gibbs at the 101 instead of Bijan now. But still, it is a splitting hair argument. Now, dropping down to our next tier right here, this is largely the same. Jonathan Taylor is at 3. I've still got Hampton at 4, and I'm not budging on that one, and we'll discuss that more here in a minute. Jonathan Taylor signs the new deal. He is officially practicing, looks good to go in Indianapolis' offense, which desperately needs him now more than ever because Indianapolis can't get healthy at the receiver position. You just had Keenan Allen sign over to the receiver position for Indianapolis. This is just a situation where Jonathan Taylor is so needed in this offense, and there is still concerns. Like, I still do get concerns about the workload that he's going to face this year. I don't think it's going to be good for him to have that many carries 2 years in a row, but I still do think JT should be at 3 because I just have a lot of uncertainty outside of JT and really outside the first tier. And that's why I'm sticking with Omarion Hampton. Omarion Hampton has been this range for me all offseason long. And I painted the picture all offseason too. Better offensive line. Hopefully Tyler Biadasz is not out forever. Better offensive coordinator with Mike McDaniel there. And overall, Omarion Hampton looked really good last year. Like, if you split it up between before he got injured and after he got injured, he was still playing really good after he got injured as well. So I just bank on a first-round draft pick in the NFL draft to be utilized more as a 3-down back, even after Mike McDaniel comes out and says, yeah, I'm going to use all 3 running backs. Do you guys know how big of a troll Mike McDaniel is for fantasy? He's been doing this for years with Devon Etienne, and it has not hurt Devon Etienne, so I'm just not going to say that it hurts Omarion Hampton either. Now, number 5 and 6 and 7 are pretty much set in stone for me too. James Cook, Devon Etienne, Ashton Jeanty. James Cook, to me, best offense of the bunch, obviously. Guy has been nothing but consistent and a touchdown threat every single year because Buffalo runs the ball more than any other team in the NFL inside the 5 to 10 yard line. So Buffalo is going to continue to utilize James Cook in a goal line back role because it's worked. Even if they lessen its touches in theory this year, what you've also heard is that they're interested in getting him more involved in the pass game as well. So overall, James Cook is a really good pick in fantasy drafts. Devon Etienne, though, this is a hot topic, and I'm well aware of this discussion. Everybody says, well, Ryan, the Dolphins' offense sucks, so why would you have Etienne ranked over Jeanty? Well, my counter to that has been, Jeanty, there's such a pro-Jeanty crowd. Where's the Devon Etienne crowd defending the situation as being basically the same as the Raiders? I mean, seriously. Offensive line-wise, the Raiders may be a little bit better, but how many more games are they going to win than Miami? I wouldn't bet that many more games. I do think that they're both great players, and they're probably the bright spots in their offense. But the way I see Devon Etienne is after the contract the dude just got, after Jeff Hafley this came out and said, sarcastically, we're going to give him 40 touches a game. That's not going to happen. But the bottom line is he's going to get so much work. With Jeanty, there still is that little bit of window of doubt that he actually might cede some touches to Mike Washington. So at this point, I feel better at this ranking now more than I ever have. Now, Chase Brown is at 8, and Saquon Barkley both Chase Brown and Saquon Barkley actually rose up into this tier for me. And my rationale for these two guys rising up to end off tier 2 is because I end up seeing them having top 3 upside. With Chase Brown, he's definitely not a guy I see as an RB1. Someone asked me on a stream the other night, do you think this guy could be Austin Eckler now? And my response to that was, no, I don't think so, because Chase Brown over the years hasn't been the greatest goal line back. And that's something that Austin Eckler really thrived on. I do think from a receiving perspective, Chase Brown has tons of chops, but I do think his upside in fantasy is limited to a certain degree. And again, I think he has top 3 upside. That's why he's now in this tier. But I do think I have to call it when he gets compared to a guy like Austin Eckler, who I do see as just a better goal line back than Chase Brown is and possibly ever will be. Now, when it comes to Saquon, I've been getting a good feeling about this one. And I don't know why, considering the next guy I've got ranked, I've got a really bad feeling on, and they're the same age, basically. This guy has had his own injury history. Their offense potentially worse off with A.J. Brown now. Why am I so into him? The reason I am is because Lane Johnson missed a bunch of time last year, and Lane Johnson changes their entire offense, not just the O-line. The entire offense gets changed if he misses time. So now having him back, I think it's a major step in the right direction, and it's exactly what you need for Saquon to get back on track, because if you look at Saquon, the player last year, the dude was not worse off. Like, that guy was getting hit behind the line so much last year, and when he was available to get some space, Saquon still looked elite. So I do think that with the new offensive coordinator, it can't possibly get worse than what it was last year. I do have a sneaky good feeling about Barkley this year, but I'm going to keep him at 9 just because I think there's risk still. Now, dropping down to that next tier. Well. The guy who's been out on McCaffrey all offseason, people are finally catching up to a little bit. Is it contract situation? Is it because the dude is actually dealing with an injury? You know what? The bottom line is it doesn't matter, because this guy is already starting off the year without good vibes. And I'll be clear on this. Last year, he did not have good vibes around him either. He did miss some time last year, and it was already said that he was experiencing tightness in his Achilles. I understand that last year he was awesome in fantasy, the best player in fantasy last year. But the reason I was saying I'm into Saquon, but not as into McCaffrey, is because the difference between them, if you look at McCaffrey's efficiency numbers and how effective he was on a touch-per-touch basis, I'm not talking how much the guy scored in fantasy. I'm talking on a touch-per-touch basis. It was not the same. This was his worst efficiency year in like 5 years or something like that. It was not good for McCaffrey last year. So if you take away some volume, which I got a newsflash for you, is going to happen whether you like it or not, because the history is stacked up against him when it comes to running backs coming off of 350 plus touch seasons, especially when that number is 400 plus, which it was for McCaffrey last year. The news flash is he's going to lose some volume, whether he likes it or not, through injury or through the 49ers just saying, we got to get him off the field sometimes. Either way, I would actually have him lower ranked than this if I was trying to really piss people off, but I've already pissed enough people off, and this is mostly a statement ranking right here, because in all seriousness, I think this pick is going to be a disaster this year for people. Now, Derrick Henry's at 11, and Kenneth Walker is at 12 to round out the tier, and the way I see Derrick Henry is that I think, unlike McCaffrey, it's going to be an injury that takes him down. Now, obviously, I'm saying McCaffrey is an injury risk. What I'm saying with Henry, though, is I don't think that there's any efficiency metrics that you can look at that you could say, honestly, he's at a really dangerously low level. Yes, Derrick Henry has gotten a little bit less effective in yards per carry, but it doesn't matter because the guy is still above 5 yards per carry. This is elite stuff that Derrick Henry's been able to sustain, man, and I think it's just because he's built for it. So Derrick Henry, the risk gets more serious year after year after year, especially into his 30s at this point. But the bottom line is I'm not going to rank him that much lower than this because I'm already factoring in risk with an 11 ranking for him, but I'm not going to put him much lower because the upside is still really high. Now, Kenneth Walker here, the only reason he's not above both of these guys actually is just because we haven't seen it yet. With Kenneth Walker, all we've seen throughout his career is either A, they try to make him the workhorse and he gets injured, Or B, we have seen them split carries with Zach Charbonnet. Now, what's the Chiefs' plan? Do they have plans to make him the workhorse? You get conflicting reports sometimes. You have Andy Reid talking about Emmett Johnson, saying he wants to get him involved in the passing game. Then you've got other reports out that Kenneth Walker's involved in the passing game in training camp. So realistically, man, I do like Kenneth to a certain extent. In some platforms, you can get him in the back of the second, early third round. But I also do think Kenneth Walker in most other platforms is just too high of a cost for me. I don't think his production will match the draft cost at the end of the day. If you're looking to have a good time in the fantasy season this year, you need to join me on Splash Sports and do my NFL Survivor tournament that is hosted by me. It's a $30 entry, and if we fill all 556 spots, the winner gets $15,000. It's a lot of fun. I love Survivor pools. Would love for you to get in on it. Just use code FFR at sign up for a 50% deposit match and 100% payout boost. Now, dropping down to the next tier, there has been changes to this tier as well. Cam Skattebo is now at 13, rising up a spot, and Josh Jacobs has also risen up a spot as well because we had a bigger faller, and we will get into him in a minute. Now, with Cam Skattebo, I don't feel affected by the Najee Harris signing. Yes, I'm well aware Najee Harris officially is a New York Giant. Here's what you need to be aware of. Najee Harris is coming off an Achilles tear, has never been particularly explosive, has always struggled with vision, and is now in his upper 20s. And I don't even know if he's going to make the team. Like, that is not a guarantee if he makes the team. Now, what is interesting is after the Jackson Dart hit and Tyrone Tracy blew the block is when they made this move. So maybe they are, in theory, looking for a pass blocking back. So that would, in theory, lower the Cam Skattebo effectiveness and upside in pass catching situations. But until I see it, I still am going to stand by this take as well. I do think Cam Skattebo has a sneaky chance to be the RB1 in fantasy football. I think he will be healthy. I think he'll get more explosive as the year goes. And Cam Skattebo, in my opinion, is got the chops in the pass catching game and the rushing game from the end zone to be able to have an RB1 finish, albeit a low percentage chance of doing that. Now, Josh Jacobs at 14, the only reason he rose up is just because a guy fell. There's no particular news right now that's going to indicate to me he deserves to be any higher than this. Josh Jacobs is just getting back off a groin injury that caused him to miss some time. There's still a potential suspension looming for Josh Jacobs, so I do think there has to be some risk addressed when it comes to drafting Jacobs. But the thing is, man, in most places you draft, you can get him in like the third to fourth round. So I do still think the risk is worth the shot because Josh Jacobs is going to continue to be their red zone back. Now, Kyren Williams is at 15 and Jeremiah Love lands at 16. He is the one who fell a bunch, and of course, we're going to have to address that. Kyren Williams, though, the reason he rose is just because of Jeremiah Love falling. Jeremiah Love, I do think, is going to be an issue when it comes to fantasy football rankings in the future. Kyren Williams, great offense he's on. I've got concerns about the Blake Corum situation. I do think Corum will continue to take more work from Kyren, but the thing is, this offense is so good in Los Angeles that as long as everyone's healthy and as long as Kyren's healthy, he's shown enough from a red zone efficiency perspective and a pass catching perspective to hold two really key roles from a fantasy perspective. Now, when it comes to Jeremiah Love, he fell, and I need to address this right away with you. I think Jeremiah Love, depending on where he falls, is still worth the cost because if you look at where he's been priced at all offseason, basically in every platform aside from ESPN, has been the back of the second to early third round. Before the injury, I thought that was worth it. Obviously, now the guy has a high ankle. It's not for sure for week one, and the reports have been out that he might be used as more of a feature back, not the feature back. Key difference there. A feature back means I don't know if this guy's going to be the lead back always. So there is concern here, especially because the Arizona offense just isn't good enough. But I do also think Jeremiah Love, if healthy, is going to be their pass catching back. And so I do think that salvages his fantasy upside to be worth a back of the third, early fourth round pick if he were to fall to you in that range. So I've got him at 16 hanging on. Now, inside this tier as well, to round us out, is Javonte Williams at 17. Javonte Williams, there's really nothing new about this one. I mean, my take on it all offseason has just been, I don't think that it's possible he gets any better from last year. What I do think is possible is that he gets a little worse. And Dallas's offense is kind of like the Rams. It's going to save Javonte if Javonte takes a step back. I do think it'll save him, but I also do think that it's possible that the guy is just less efficient on the ground, doesn't have as successful of a year running the ball in general, and the guy doesn't catch passes very well. So if he loses a little bit of efficiency on the ground, it's going to hurt his fantasy upside. So that's the reason I mitigate some risk and put him at 17, but I still do think he's a fine pick in fantasy drafts. Now, dropping down to the next tier, DeAndre Swift rose up to number 18, and Travis Etienne fell to 19, and it's not particularly against Travis Etienne. The real reason is because of DeAndre Swift and what I think about what this situation looks like in Chicago now. I've been big all offseason on the idea of 2 running backs there. Kyle Monangai, they haven't done anything. Always just kind of assume Kyle Monangai in year 2, it'll be him who takes a David Montgomery role in the offense with Ben Johnson. Well, Kyle Monangai has had the worst possible offseason when it comes to injuries, man. I mean, this guy hasn't been healthy all offseason long, and he just hyperextended his knees. So DeAndre Swift might really come out and look the same as he did in the beginning of the year for a long time this year. So DeAndre Swift, man, you just have to look at the offense and say, do I want a piece of this Bears offense, which could be top 5 very easily in fantasy football? And I think the answer most times where he's going in drafts is an absolute resounding yes. I'm fine with drafting him above cost, but I also am very excited to get him at cost. So DeAndre Swift is at 18. Travis Etienne at 19 mostly just has to do with the DeAndre Swift bump. But the one thing that bothers me is obviously there's hype around Alvin Kamara still being a pass catcher and kind of lessening Etienne's workload in that regard. I don't think too much of it, only because I do think that every team's got a plan until they get punched in the face, just like Mike Tyson said. So maybe that's New Orleans' plan, but Jordan Tyson's already injured, so who's to say Alvin Kamara won't get injured? Not rooting for it, but the guy's older, and I just don't see him lasting a full season. So ultimately, I think Etienne is going to be a good pick in the 4th round where he's going in most drafts now. Quinshon Judkins is at 20, and Travion Henderson is at 21. Now, Judkins here, I've settled into the idea that I don't think he'll finish much higher than this. And it's unfortunate because I think the talent is clearly there. Like Quinshon Judkins to me is an elite talent at running back. The guy's just on a really bad offense. And much like Atlanta, what I saw with Cleveland in preseason week 1 was abysmal. And it doesn't give me any confidence that this is going to be a multi-dimensional team that's not going to have defenses anticipating the run every freaking play it makes sense. Because that's what I saw. And if that happens, Quinshon Judkins is going to be in a similar position to last year. Under 4 yards a carry, and the guy is going to get taken off the field when it comes to pass catching because Dylan Sampson is there. So I do think Judkins kind of maxes out at 20, unfortunately. Now, Travion Henderson, this is the biggest boom-bust situation at the running back position in the top 20 for me. Like, Travion Henderson, I acknowledge Ramondre Stevenson is going to continue to be a thorn in his side. What I have also said a lot this offseason, though, is if you think about Travion Henderson and Ramondre's tendencies that are negative. So the problem with Travion has been pass blocking, right? The problem with Ramondre, though, is fumbles. So let's say the Patriots aren't a 13-win team this year, and Ramondre's fumbles cost them 2 to 3 games. At what point do the Patriots say to themselves, Ramondre's weakness is causing us more games than Travion's weakness is, and let's just move to Travion at some point in the season? I think it's on the table. That's why I'm not under-ranking him at this point. I know he's gotten the bad press and he's dropped in a lot of people's rankings. I'm going to hold him here at 21 because I still see the enormous breakout potential with him. Now, dropping down to our next tier, David Montgomery is the boringest pick in all of fantasy football, but he does land at 22, and Breece Hall does rise up to 23. Now, it's interesting why Breece rises up. My thing with Monty, though, is that David Montgomery is in position to where you just have to respect the red zone work. I mean, this guy, I don't think going to be the type of back that you're going to get 1,200 yards from on the ground. I don't think people are really arguing that. And also, I am a big believer in Woody Marks getting a lot of pass catching upside that will minimize David Montgomery's impact from fantasy football perspective. But you have to address the guy will probably get close to 10 rushing touchdowns this year, and that alone is saving a 22 ranking. Now, Breece Hall, the only reason he rose up is because of the fact that the reports all offseason about a three-headed backfield monster, they started to die down a little bit, and there was more reports surfacing that he's probably going to be a workhorse. There's still a Jets issue there with Breece Hall, and I'm not going to overrank him because of that. And on top of that, he obviously injured his groin just in practice this week. So Breece Hall looks like he'll miss the rest of preseason, possibly back for week 1. So realistically, that's not affecting his ranking that much. I just have a lot of reservations when it comes to any Jets player, and Breece is unfortunately no exception to that rule. Now, Bucky Irving lands at 24, and Chuba lands at 25. Now, Bucky, he did ultimately drop below Breece, and my rationale having Bucky above Breece for a long time was if it's going to be a split backfield situation, give me the running back on the better offense, which was always Bucky. It had nothing to do with talent. If it was based on talent, Breece Hall would be above Bucky Irving. But this wasn't a talent argument. Again, if we're getting confirmation that Breece Hall is going to be the predominant lead back, then Bucky Irving is way less enticing because we've gotten none of those assurances when it comes to Kenneth Gainwell's role and even Sean Tucker's role at the goal line potentially. Now, at 26, to round out this tier, is Bashul Tutin, who I also feel like the majority of the community is coming back my way on because it got out of control there for a little bit. I mean, Bashul Tutin was starting to rise up into like the top of round 5, back of round 4 type of situation, and that just never made sense to me. I mean, Jacksonville has gone back and forth on reporting on this all off season long. I want people to understand this. Like for a while there, it was like Bashul Tutin, breakout player. This guy is going to be a 1,500 yard scrimmage guy for us. That's what Jacksonville and Liam Cohen said. Well, then it comes out, well, actually, we're kind of thinking more of a split backfield. Liam Cohen's a politician, guys. People need to understand that when it comes to this Jacksonville offense and why you can't get too overboard on any option. I'm fine ranking him here because if someone does break out, it is Tutin. He is the more talented player than Rodriguez, but I still think Rodriguez is going to serve a red zone role. Now, dropping down to the last tier, there was some changes here because Kyle Monungai used to be at the top of this tier. He was actually in a tier above him. That's no longer the case. You have Jadarian Price at 27 and Bill Krosky at 28. Now, Jadarian Price, I think my thing with him is never going to change. Until I see anything on the field that proves me wrong, I'm never going to like this pick. The Seattle Seahawks, I think, made a mistake, but what do I know? Like, I'm not a scout. I'm not on the Seahawks team. The Seahawks are also good at player analysis and just taking the right players in the draft. So part of me wants to buy in. I just can't buy in on a backup running back in college that is drafted in the first round and expected to be a workhorse guy. On top of that, much like Bashul Tutin, there's already expectancies of split backfield opportunities. So George Holani, whether it's Emmanuel Wilson, it doesn't really matter. If Jadarian Price can't take the backfield by storm before Zach Charbonnet comes back, which might be sooner than anticipated, then I think Jadarian Price is going to be a disappointment this year. Good thing he's not being drafted too high anymore. Now, Ja'Cory Krosky Merritt. This is also, for 2 years in a row now, such a hot topic, and I really do think I'm mostly on the side of pro Ja'Cory Krosky Merritt at this point. Now, I will be honest, in the wide receiver rankings, I was talking about Terry McLaurin and why I'm cooling on Washington as a team a little bit, so it does apply to Ja'Cory Krosky Merritt. But at this point, the only reason he's not a little higher in my rankings from where he was last time is because of the fact that I am fading Washington a little bit. Because at this point, I do think Ja'Cory Krosky Merritt is clearly the preferred guy in Washington. It's still uncertain, though. There is still uncertainties about his pass-catching abilities and what he does as a pass blocker, so there is risk with this one still. But if things work out like I originally thought they could with Washington, and Ja'Cory Krosky Merritt's the feature back, then you know Bill Krosky has more upside than this. Tony Pollard is at 29, and Rico Dowdle ends it off at number 30. So Tony Pollard, this is realistically a ranking that should be higher because I do think Tennessee's offense is an interesting one to watch this year. Cam Ward, not encouraging in the preseason. I'm not arguing that. But Tony Pollard did look very good in the preseason work that he got. And Tony Pollard is in a contract year and fits a lot of metrics in my late league-winning running backs research that helped me find Chuba Hubbard in 2024. So I am going to stick with a top 30 ranking, and realistically, the only reason he's not a little higher is because I do think there could be potentially a split between him and Tyjae Spears, and there's a threat of Nick Singleton later on down the line. Now, Rico Dowdle being at 30, and honestly, Jaylen Warren is at 31. The reason why Rico Dowdle is above Jaylen Warren, and has been for me all offseason, is because I think Rico gets the more important work. I do think that he'll get the majority of goal line touches. Therefore, his touchdown numbers will be much higher than Warren's. I also think that he'll average more carries on a per-game basis than Jaylen Warren, and I think that his running style is more equipped for a Mike McCarthy offense. But I also do think Jaylen Warren is going to catch the majority of passes out of the backfield. And of course, with a 40-plus-year-old quarterback, that's a really important role to have in an offense like this. So that's why they're back-to-back for me. I do prefer Rico slightly just because of the touchdown upside, but Jaylen Warren is definitely going to get his GOAT when it comes to the pass-catching upside. So realistically, they should be back-to-back in most rankings out there. So let me know what you think of the rankings in the comments below. I appreciate you guys hanging out with me today. And if you want to see the top 30 wide receiver rankings after preseason week 2, click on this video right here.